Are you and Jeff on the same page? Yes. Your sister's come out.
She just kind of, she moved, that's a lot of the other. She comes into this and she's the, like this. She got one on the mother, she would walk on that. So, but, we got some. Oh, well, now we'll do that. Let's break it.
It's like I can go down there and do this opportunity. You have to help them. You.
I wonder how many parents think this as they're raising their children. And one day the roles will be completely reversed.
I've always told my mom, you better treat me nice because I'm a good person.
Home for mom.
I can remember how I felt in this. Said, you're going to have to work hard, Susie, and all this, and pay them out. He said, I said, I know nothing about the finances. You'll never come anything about the finances. He said, it's all big and best. And I said, I know.
She says, well, I need to go my paperwork with you. I said, where's that? She says, in the state. What combination she say? I'm going to look up to get everything out, you know. It's like that's not. Anyways, if it's all together in the state, why can't we just put it out?
See, I'm the opposite of all these people. Every time I get ready to go to Belarus, I'm like, all right, read the instructions if I die. Make sure you know what's going on.
But you know, it's
I can't
like,
get Rachel to read it.
it's the thing about the wills and all that stuff. Benji and I are dragging our feet, and I really need to educate myself on rehab. I need to be, but it's one of those things.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. I mean, you know, we're in the same predicament. We're young.
Yeah.
But
There's
man,
something-
if we both get in an accident together, I certainly don't want.
Wills are, I don't know, they're one of the things you just gotta put on your calendar because they are so simple and so cheap and quick and.
You can bring up a form on the internet and sit and.
Yeah, you can do that if you want, yeah.
But every year, I have at least one or two people who come in to bring in their tax work, who I've always talked to the spouse before, but the spouse has died suddenly. And now here's left the other spouse who has not a clue. About 1 year, one of the saddest things I ever saw, this lady came in, her son came in with her. Her husband traveled a lot. He'd gotten cancer and wasn't even going to tell his wife and son. But he ended up being bedridden there at the end, so he had to tell him. Left her with, she thought she at least had her home. Found out she had absolutely nothing. He basically opted off, didn't tell them anything. And she had no ability to provide for herself. Every year you just see minor cases like that.
Something I always ran into at the bank was people misunderstand the concept of don't put all your eggs in one basket. That is an investment strategy. That's not a banking strategy. And I had a customer when I was at the Chase. It was the thing he enjoyed doing in his retirement was to have money everywhere. I mean, and not a lot of money, a few $1,000 here or there. He had, and his widow walked in one day and he passed away very suddenly, and it was a nightmare. He had money in banks in different states, all over the place, just rinky-dink stuff. It's like the effort wasn't even worth it for her, but it had to be resolved and had to be, and she had no idea what all he'd done. It was just, just stick it all in the bank.
When I walked in a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and he said, my wife has Alzheimer's. She said, I've been taking care of her at home, but, she's taken a major turn for the worse. And now she's headed into a nursing home. So he said, I want to know how to protect my money and my assets so the nursing home won't get it. I said, you're 5 years too late.
Yep, too late.
You had to do this more than 5 years ago. And it turned out his wife passed away a couple weeks later, but he didn't anticipate that. He didn't know how many years she might live in the nursing home.
People don't want to talk about that stuff.
And this is a businessman. You would have thought he'd been more knowledgeable of this kind of thing. What is it?
Well, what we found out, and Gary Smith is an attorney in town, but we were just talking about this last night. has a partner, a lady. Now, she specializes in end of life care, and so a spouse at home does not lose everything to a nursing home. And we have found this out, that if Keith would have to put me in the nursing home, he could keep $80,000, he could keep the house, one car, and all the assets, all of your household belongings. Now, should he die, I'm not sure if the nursing home would come back and.
Yeah, you have well,
Well,
I don't want to say
might have said that
small.
wrong. They wouldn't have, this man had some commercial property.
Yeah,
I see.
you have an amount that's protected.
Yeah.
Right,
But
right.
for
his
some
house- yeah,
for
that's-
some people who have hundreds and hundreds of
I
thousands of
see.
dollars of assets, I mean.
Car, so
So nobody was gonna take anything away from him, but what I'm saying is his cost would have been astronomical. That's what I'm saying. Nobody takes it away from you, but because you have all those assets, you pay through the nose in nursing home care, is what it comes down to.
Because you didn't
The
have
nursing home
long-term
wants
care.
you to sign everything, because I know when put that in,
Mhm.
but, and I just said, no, we're not signing anything, we don't know what's gonna happen.
Oh, yeah, they want
Last
the
one,
income
they
transferred
want,
to
yeah,
them.
because he had so many days in there anyway before we had.
I think that is the most inequitable thing in our society. I do not want anybody, I'm thankful that no one is put down because they're old and can't pay for a nursing home. But people that work all their lives and save and would like to leave an inheritance to their kids, or they've been responsible, going to the nursing home
They have them
and
die
pay out
earlier.
the wazoo, and someone else pays nothing.
That's the
It's
great
secure.
moral dilemma we have. We have learned to keep the carcass alive beyond an appropriate time. I mean, if they want to leave an inheritance, they need to die when they get sick.
What was
I'm
writing on
serious.
this card? No.
Well, I'm just saying,
No more money.
how many of the people in a nursing home have what we would call quality of life? I mean, they don't. They go there to die.
Dad would incorporate it.
There are places we
They
send-
stuff everything.
We send our old people there to
I know, it's just
die.
his body that is gonna figure something out, so.
And you look at the nursing homes, and a lot of them operate on a shoestring, and it's still that expensive. I mean, they've got minimum wage CNA, you know.
It's 50,000 a year, minimum, for one person.
Minimum.
And a minimum.
And that doesn't count their continued
It doesn't pay for
healthcare,
their medications or clothes or anything.
I mean, if they have to have numerous amounts of diapers and stuff
Oh,
like
yeah.
that.
Well, then throw in all
Well,
the,
then
the
they
medical.
limit on what you can have, and if you need more than that, if a relative doesn't step up and buy that for you, then you're
Pay their
stuck.
price.
Yeah.
The whole system is, like I said, it's a moral dilemma, because
Start
100 years ago and before that, when people got sick, they died. That's the way
Maybe
it
that
works.
Eskimo
That's right.
theory's not so bad.
Send them off on a piece of ice.
Ice flood, on breaking ice in the springtime.
Well, but see, that's the thing is, it cracks me up that a godless society has somehow determined that if we have the ability, and we've taken that to the extreme, if we can do something to avoid a deadbeat from starving their kids, we need to do it. So we need to have the school corporation feed them. I mean, it's just, I guess the original idea has some thoughtfulness, but it doesn't work that way. I mean, people are gonna make the
The
choices
thing is,
they
the
make.
government has stepped in and does everything now, so people don't.
Right.
And so the church.
Well,
doesn't.
that's the, right, that's the hard
Because,
thing
like my
is,
grandma, she talked about when her kids were kids, they would send, all the parents that had extra money would send an extra quarter with their kids. So the kids that had nothing could at least get a milk or something.
Right.
You know, or send a little extra with their child, so, and people help people.
and see, the pattern we always
Government
see,
for handout.
the pattern we always see in scripture of benevolence is the one who is unable. The one who is unable. Because that's why Paul makes the point, if you don't work, you're not gonna eat.
Right.
Okay, this isn't that type of system. It's the orphans and the widows and those that have dealt with things in life outside of their control and it's those cases where benevolence and giving are supposed to happen. It's not the individual that doesn't want to. That's never the case.
But you know, this is the lady that works with me, she said her niece put on Facebook the niece who doesn't work and has has one child, a young child, who seems to go on vacations everywhere, who knows how to suck every system that there is. She needed a new phone, or she needed a phone, and she didn't want it. She put exactly, I had to get this at 6. And she put that on Facebook.
Oh, my word.
Yep, this is what it's come to.
Bernie, you should have
Seriously.
seen my dumpsters after Christmas. People that supposedly have trouble paying rent. My dumpsters were packed full of more boxes and trash than my kids would get in 10 years. I mean, we're not going to do that stuff. We're not going to blow that type of money on things.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just the whole mentality of,
Look at the Craigslist, there's people on there, especially around Christmas. I don't have anything I give my 4 kids or my 6 kids or my 9 kids, and it's like, anybody that can help out, now here's what we need.
in today's society,
Oh, yeah.
in today's society,
Yeah.
kids in lower income situations can get a minimum of 1 new coat every year.
And
They
that's
can
if
get
you
a
don't
new
travel around
backpack. They
and
can
several
get,
places.
yeah, if you just make an effort and go to the churches or the community programs or the nonprofits, the amount of stuff you can get. I mean, I don't know. And again, I don't know. I want to give credit to the idea that our society at least wants to, we look back at our history of when people were forced to work 16 hours a day and people were starving to death, and that's where some of those things came from. But it's just amazing over a short period of 60 to 80 years, the mentality that generates. I mean, I think that for something like that to be there, I know the guys in our congregation have spent a lot of time talking about where is the line on an appropriate gift to people. I mean, that's hard to determine, but I think a conversation needs to take place. Our government has got to the point where, I mean, like I said, I'll have 19-year-old kids get on disability. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. They've never even attempted to get a job. But they found a doctor that said they were mentally unstable.
And that's the easiest route to go.
Is the mental thing, yeah.
And
I've
it's the
learned that.
easiest thing to go.
But I'm telling you, that's gonna come back to haunt sooner or later, is it being labeled
Yeah.
a mental problem.
But you realize how messed up everything is.
What kind of
I-
life is that when that's over?
I've asked myself for years, who are the doctors willing to do this? And then it hit me a couple years ago. I'm like, the same doctor that probably gets a cut from the prescription companies and for prescribing medication to these people for the next 80
It's like
years.
the
It's so
chiropractor that
messed
used to
up.
sign word slips for my guys at the all these guys, they go to this chiropractor and he's like, slip forms couldn't work for 3 days. So I got him on one day. I didn't use this word, I used another word, but I viewed him prostituting his profession.
Yeah.
Because I said, you're willing to $25 just sign a slip for anybody. It'll give you $25.
But you guys realize, and that's just another distraction, another hurdle of people coming to Christ and overcoming. I mean, man, when you have someone, I've made comments for years that I think one of the hardest groups to bring to Christ in the future will be homosexuals, because they are being educated that it is a natural aspect of their biology, when that is blatantly false. And it's the same point with this same type of mentality. I mean, you have tons of people being raised up in many societies around the world, especially ours, that are told they have a mental defect at 18 years old and are on disability, have no motivation to be proactive or to work or to be selfless. All of those godly characteristics are out the window. And it's all about, again, what you can get.
Look
from
at
the
these
system.
kids though in first grade that are being identified with learning disabilities and put on the high practice, put on a drug. They go through their whole lives, and why would they not think
Right.
a drug was the answer to everything? And then they are mentally unstable when they're adults. But in the paper this week, it said that Trump, one of his first actions is we have a $500 billion cost to Medicaid in the United States every year.
Yep.
And what he intends to do is to get block grants. Right now, Indiana can send a bill to pay for our Medicaid. And if it doubles or triples, there are no questions asked. The federal government just sends the money to pay for Medicaid. What he wants to do is have block grants so that every state, it'll be determined, well, Indiana maybe needs this much for Medicaid. So Indiana's gonna have to be responsible to keep it within those means and fight fraud.
That's basic business.
And that
That's
makes
basic
sense.
business mentality.
Yes.
Or
I
the
mean, if any-
commercials that say that all this stuff is diseases.
Yeah.
Come and talk to me because you have a disease. You made the choice to drink. You made the
Right,
choice
right.
to put the heroin or whatever you do with the stuff.
See, that's my whole thing is I don't want to be a champion of more government regulation, but it's like, if you're gonna pass out the money, hire more auditors.
Right.
I mean, has this person ever been visited by someone just to see an inkling of maybe if there's fraud? Maybe there's fraud there. I mean, we're
They
talking about.
try to hold down, job what happens.
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah. It's just, the day when we lived in Newcastle, our neighbors, like I've mentioned, we had a husband and wife neighbor, real sweet couple. They worked for a legitimate call center company where you work from home. They went into their home office for 8 hours a day, and they were the people, like, if the infomercial comes up and says, call 1-800 for this special frying pan, they were the ones on the other end. And they made 12 to 13 bucks an hour. And the day I met them, I'm like, anyone can work for a living. If you can sit in your pajamas in your office and do, I mean, I
There's
don't know.
something out there for you.
Like I said, it's just the mentality portion. It's the people that have been taught no desire to make an effort. That's the whole frustration. It's just people don't make an effort. You don't even try. It's too attractive to not try.
But we're talking, I mean, they're 26, 27, 28 years. I mean, the gal that works for me, she's 26. And she knows, doesn't matter how many surgeries and all stuff that she has to have, what Gavilon doesn't pay, pays well.
Right.
And, you know, we've got a big bunch of people who've been raised on this.
Well, I mean, you talk to any hospital, I mean, people on Medicaid, well, I mean, if they get a sniffle, they'll go to the emergency room.
Exactly.
I mean, at a
Exactly what
point
she
in my
does.
life, I had to
Little
look at my wife writhing in pain and say, are you sure we have to go to the emergency room? Because I know the second we walk in, it'll be $2,000 to $3,000. And she ended up having appendicitis. That makes me sick to this day. We had to sit there and have a conversation. Are you sure? And other people, like I said, they go in and say, no, a sniffle.
Think of what it's costing us to give medical care to our prisoners. The prisons that are overflowing. I'll never forget when I had Dad to a podiatrist one time, and what it was costing us just for him to get his toenails trimmed. The sheriff brought a guy in shackles.
Yep.
In shackles to get something done at the podiatrist's office, and you can barely pay for it. Not him.
And see, we look at other societies like Belarus and stuff and think, oh, how uncivilized if they don't have all these services for, I mean, and those services are ultimately provided by the government, but you don't have a rich government. So the government gives absolutely nothing to run the hospitals and nothing to run the psychiatric hospitals and all those things. So the care is much less. And I don't know, anyway. All of this stems from ungodliness. I mean, all of it. It's old. You boil everything down, and it's about self or God. It's about self or God, and that's why we got to encourage that attitude. We need to demonstrate that attitude. We can sit here and talk about people in certain positions in society all the time, but we're in our own positions relative to other people that can become distractions and can become hurdles to get over. And that's what we've got, So. All right, let's jump into this. First of all, was there any questions at all on home equity products that we looked at? If you recall, we looked at like 2 or 3 specific products that are usually part of most people's lives in some regard. I want to look at credit stuff. Again, I think this is something, you're not taught this in school. You're taught calculus, which is much more applicable. than your credit score and how your credit score works. This is something, it is the most unforgiving thing I can think of in our society. I mean, if you mess it up, it's a long, long, long time before it's fixed. So I was going through this. I mean, a lot of my experience from this comes from working with customers at the bank. It wasn't my job, it wasn't my responsibility, but I got to see the credit report of every single person that applied for a loan and became very familiar with all of the guidelines around credit, ultimately what affects those credit bureaus, things that affect the lendability from the bank's point of view, what banks we're looking at. And from that, I feel that this is something that I'm pretty familiar with. Everything I'm going to tell you today, though, you can find on the internet in informational articles. I mean, it'll give you a pretty good idea of this stuff. But I thought the best way to start out would just be to do kind of some definitions of things. I was trying to figure out how to really present this, but credit is the ability of a customer to obtain goods or services before payment. Based on the trust, that payment will be made in the future. The whole idea of credit is it's really anyone who's going to lend you something, rent you an object, lend you money, needs to try to determine your willingness and ability to pay. Okay? A lot of people have the ability to pay and don't pay. You know, I've told people that in my business. It's while I run checks and things, a lot of times it comes down to a gut check on who I rent apartments to, because I have had tenants before that I thought these are the pristine. I mean, I remember I had a husband and a wife move in. She was like an RN and he was a truck driver. Great income, great job. I'm like, this is going to be the perfect tenants. She left 3 days after they moved in. So her income went away. He was a bum, wouldn't pay anything, was gone all the time. It was a nightmare. I've had other tenants that I thought, gosh, I don't know about this. I'm not sure if it, and they were excellent. You know, a lot of it comes down to the willingness to pay. And that's kind of what feeds in a little bit to credit and credit score. I mean, your credit score, for all intents and purposes, is a gauge of your past responsibility in making payments. That's really what it is. Trying to calculate a score there. A credit report is a detailed report of an individual's credit history. Credit history, again, is payment history and the accounts that you've had. That's what a credit report is. It includes all of that stuff. It includes things that you didn't pay. It includes judgments or collections or anything of that nature. All that stuff is going to be there. Your credit score, again, is a number assigned using a model to a person that indicates to lenders their capacity to repay. Okay? While willingness is part of it, it also demonstrates, hey, maybe this person had some financial issues years ago. They may have been completely willing to pay, but their ability to pay was lacking. All of that, based on certain models, calculates into the credit score. The credit bureau is a company that collects information relating to the credit ratings of individuals and makes it available to credit card companies, financial institutions, etc. There are 3 credit bureaus. Okay, there is Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Those 3 bureaus ultimately generate a credit report for you based on the information sent to them. Did it become one of those 3?
Yes, it might. I don't know what it's good for.
Now there are other databases out there. Maybe I should speak more clearly that these are the 3 primary, but I don't know of any others. But there are other databases out there. For example, a lot of people don't know if you have a checking account charge off at a bank, there is a database out there called Check Systems. It is an independently functioning database that banks send information to, and when you go to open up a new checking account, they're going to run a Check Systems report to see if you've had something charged off ever somewhere else. So there are other databases out there that can track that information. These 3 credit reporting bureaus is where every credit report, credit score I've ever seen comes from. Okay, but they get information. I want to make this very clear because it's going to be important later. They get information that is sent to them. And they put it into a report and I'll show you examples here in a second. They identify the different kinds of debt that we've talked about, such as revolving, installment, things like that. But they assemble that report. And then from that report, these three bureaus always create their own score. So you can have a slightly different TransUnion score than you do an Equifax score. You have a slightly different Equifax score than you do an Experian score. The most popular model, though, is the FICO score. And the FICO score is simply a credit score created by the Fair Isaac Corporation using their model. That's all that means. So if you ever hear the term FICO score, that is synonymous with your credit score, but it uses specifically this model. Some banks will use this model on one of your credit reports. Some of them will pull all three credit reports and build it into the model to determine your FICO score. Okay? In the FICO score category, a good credit score is considered 680 to 740. I'll tell you, when I left banking, you could get a home mortgage on a 680 credit score. Okay? You could get a credit card on about a 720 credit score. And yes, you heard that right. It's more difficult at times to get a credit card because, again, unsecured debt, we talked about that, than a mortgage. Bad credit score would be under 600. At that point, you've had delinquencies, you potentially had judgments, you've had collections, other things like that. The average in the American public is 695. Okay, that's kind of where you're at. And the 695, you're going to get approved for some things in that range, other things maybe not so much, or you're going to get a higher tier of pricing because of that credit score. So here's how the FICO score works. The model, when it takes into account everything to determine your score, 35% of that calculation is your payment history. And whether or not you've been 30, 60, 90, or 120 days late. Most people do not know this, okay? But if you are 29 days late on your mortgage payment every month for 20 years, it will not hurt your credit score at all. It is only reported to a credit bureau if you are over 30 days late. Now, you may get a fee every month from the mortgage company for being 5 days late. Same with the credit card. You may get a fee for being 1 day late. But you could be 29 days late on that credit card every single month and it not hurt your credit score or hurt your credit bureau because it's only going to be reported at 30 days. And based on these intervals, has a higher impact on the negativity of the loan score. The accounts owed. Okay, this is your ratio on revolving debt. We talked about this. Remember with credit cards, remember the customer that had two $10,000 cards and he made all the effort to pay off one and then he closed it? Okay, huge effect on credit score. When that guy had that paid off and those two cards were sitting there, one empty and one full, he had a 50% debt to credit or debt utilization ratio. The second he closed that card, he jumped back up to 100. Okay, that's why young people who have a $400 credit card, sometimes, and that's all they have, sometimes their credit score does this. I mean, literally from 1 month to the next, they have a 720 credit score, they got a 600 credit score. I mean, because when it takes that snapshot, it's going to look at the ratio. So if they have a $400 credit limit and they've got $5 in usage, that looks great. If they have a $400 credit limit and they've got $400 in usage, not so good. 35 and 30%. Those are huge. The length of credit history is 15%. Yes, that young person can have a 720 credit score, but sometimes that's not going to be enough. Yeah, I mean, the 18-year-old with a perfect credit card history is never going to have an 800 plus score. I mean, that drove me nuts for years. I mean, to have perfect payment history, some of it comes into the time. It literally takes 10 or more years to really move up into the upper echelons of credit score and being in the credit bureau. When you actually pull a credit bureau, like a bank does, it tells them flat out, this is how many days they have in credit history. Okay? Something to consider there is sometimes an older generation, but the goal, if you're wanting to pay everything off and have no debt, I have seen people come along in their 60s before they need to borrow money that it doesn't matter if they have $1 million worth of assets. There is no record of whether or not they'll pay a bill. They have no credit score. They have nothing. They're not lendable because they have no history. And they start all the way over because they've had debt paid off for many, many years. So it takes a look at all that stuff. It combines those things. I mentioned 18-year-olds with high credit scores. Total time of accounts is what can push scores over 800. New credit. High consolidation of opened accounts can lower your score. Okay. That means the credit bureau and the FICO model are going to look at, he just went down to National Credit Union and applied for a loan. And the next day he went to US Bank, and the next day he went to Union Savings. That tells us that he is in need of money, he's potentially strapped, we're going to lower his score to communicate to banks that he might be a higher risk. Okay? But again, only 10% of that in the FICO model. The credit mix, having a little bit of everything. Yes, that 18-year-old has a credit card, but that's why if it's flawless, they're at a 720 score, because they don't have a mix and they don't have the history, and those things that drives it higher. Having that credit mix means something to the credit bureau. They don't just want to see $100,000 of credit card limit and no mortgages or installment loans. Okay, and that breaks down again into the three to four areas we talked about: revolving, mortgage, installment, and miscellaneous loans such as leases. Okay, they want to see that mix there. There's what again can push your score higher or lower. Any questions on this?
The only things reported here are loan payments, right? I mean, there aren't total bills or things that are reported.
Correct.
Correct.
Unless they get into a collection status, and then the
Okay.
collections are reported. But yeah, you're correct. You're trying to think of any situation ever where I've seen anything other than a loan. It's going to be loan. It's some type of loan.
Right.
But as I've stated again, it's loans that are reported. So if you have a personal loan with Fred for $100 million and you've paid great for 10 years, that's doing nothing for your credit score unless Fred is actually reporting it to your bureau. And typically there's a fee for that relationship. So Fred's not going to report it. Okay? That's something people run into sometimes. It's very popular with smaller properties for people to sell on contract. And that drives me nuts. Because seller comes along, okay, can you get financed? No, I can't get financed. Okay, how about I sell it to you on contract for 5 years, and then you have to buy it from me in 5 years? Nothing's going to change in 5 years. They're not credit worthy now. Their credit isn't going to change in 5 years. And in that big, massive payment they're paying every month isn't even helping their credit. It's not even doing anything. They would be better off to do something. They would be better off to get a cosigner or something that generates a loan on the bureau, because that would, and I'll get more into that as we go. Any other questions about the breakdown? Has everyone heard of FICO score? Have you ever heard that term? That's what it is. It's a specific model that again can be used. Like US Bank uses TransUnion Bureau. They pull TransUnion and generate a FICO score. Union Savings might use Experian. They pull the Experian report, generate a FICO score.
I was going to say, does US Bank think that's the best one to go by, the most accurate?
All three of them are accurate. It's the thing that is weird and bugs me, which again, I'll get to this, but you may have one bank that you have a loan with that only reports to the bureaus. And I don't get how they can really get away with that or do that, but they will. You'll have a bank that, and again, I'll get to this, but a huge beef I have with Union Savings and Loan, they report to one bureau, and one of them is not TransUnion. So you realize how many times I had long-time customers of Union Savings and Loan come into US Bank, and at times they didn't have a credit score. TransUnion had no report because Union Savings and Loan would not report. That to me is one huge issue with small banks. They want to save money. Yeah. They'll report it if you get negative. They'll report it if there's bad activity. But a lot of times, I've had full-blown mortgages. I had customers who had mortgages with Union Savings for 20 years, no history.
It did. To ask them before you use them?
You can.
I mean,
99.99999% of people would never ask them that because they would have no idea. They don't know how their credit works. But to me, it's a big deal.
Right.
I mean, you want it to report. And small banks, in my experience, are that way. FCN doesn't report loans I have to my bureau. I mean, even personal loans I have in my personal name, they don't report to the bureau. Union Savings doesn't report to the bureau. So if you have a solid relationship 100% with small banks, it may be doing a massive disservice to your development of credit, your development of creditworthiness. So,
Bank versus credit union.
huh?
A bank versus a credit union. Is a credit union considered small amount? Or should
In my experience, actually, the credit unions report more than the small banks do. Because sometimes, like NATCO is part of a bigger conglomerate. I mean, they're a credit union, but they're a bigger entity. So, I mean, I always saw them on credit reports. I never had a problem with them, you know. But this little one over here, what is that, Whitewater? I don't know. I mean, it's literally up to the financial institution as to whether or not they would. This is an example of, I think this one is TransUnion, and this is a positive account, okay? And this is the kind of stuff you'll see when you pull the credit report. You'll see the date that it was opened. You'll see the loan type. Again, it will either usually refer to, it'll flat out tell you if it's a credit card or an installment, but normally it's always going to break it up into revolving installment, mortgage, blah, 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 okay? The date that it was updated, the current payment status, currently paid, paying as agreed, okay? The terms, paid monthly. And then you're going to kind of see this grid that goes back years and years and years. And it is flat out going to tell you if the payment was made okay that month. Okay. Here's an example of a bad one. Okay. This account was charged off, written off. It's telling you on the credit bureau. This one I think is Experian. And I wanted to show this one from Experian because I think this is really cool. They actually tell the consumer when it will disappear off of their account. It will actually go away. Okay. So at that date, this charged off account vanished from this person's credit report, and therefore all calculations. But something I want to point out is it was opened in September of 1999, and the date of status, okay, so, oh, you can't see that. What I wanted to show you guys is when this started happening, okay? We're back in May of 2008. This says okay. Sorry, you can't see that. Okay, 30. What does 30 mean? Got 30 days late. Okay, 30. Okay, 30, 60. Okay, 30, 60, 90, collection, charge off. 2009, December of 2009 was when the account charged off. When did it go away? 7 years later. 7 years. This account would single-handedly destroy this person's credit score and credit report because it hung out there. Okay? And there's things to know about, you know, I don't want to get too thick into this. I'm never going to tell anyone not to pay a bill. Okay? But if this person, one credit score strategy, if this person would have called in December of 2014 and said, I want to work on paying this off over the next 5 years, and they made a single payment, if they would have paid $1, this date would have started over. So they could have paid off for 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, the account is paid off, big whoop. It's still a zero balance charge off that then would have lasted another 7 years on their report. And yes, it would have helped a little bit, but in this case, it was actually better. Sounds horrible, but when it charged off and the mess happened, they were better to let it sit and start the timer ticking for purposes of credit score. Okay. Again, I don't necessarily want to encourage that. I'm just saying I've seen people that did that before. They got a horrible account in the charge-off status, and then they're like, I am convicted to pay it off. Can I pay it off over 10 years or something? So they pay. So at that point, you have a delinquent account hovering on someone's credit report for decades at that point. And yes, if it gets paid off, it slightly adjusts the FICO score, it is still classified as a charged off account. It will always be a charged off account. If you pay off a collection, it just becomes a zero balance collection. Yes, it adjusts your FICO slightly. It may cause a bank to say, well, you were on the fence. Yeah, we'll go ahead and loan you the loan because you paid off the collection itself will still remain and calculated into the FICO potentially for 7 years. Very unforgiving. And we're talking about rinky-dink, stupid little $30 medical collections. That's why I call the hospital that we pay a bill to every month and say, I just want to make sure your accounting department doesn't have some $50 bill hovering over here that we missed. Because medical facilities, and I know they've cracked out on that with legislation, they are notorious for sending $100 to collection without a lot of notice. I mean, they'll send out one notice, and then if they don't have something within 30 days, they just, I mean, it could have got lost in the mail or whatever, and then they send a collection to someone's credit report. And those are oftentimes things worth disputing if need be. Because, I mean, you can request these bureaus to investigate something on your report if there's identity fraud or whatever, and they're required by law to investigate it. And if something is just removed or disappears, just like this, you reapply that model and the score can jump astronomically. I mean, these things have a massive, massive impact. But guys, I've had customers before at the bank that, I mean, they kind of made a little joke about, sometimes just, you pay it a month late, and it's like, you don't understand what a couple of those are doing. You get a couple of 30s in here, your score tanks. I mean, it goes down at that point. And as you can see, there was 8 years of history there. That 30 doesn't just disappear. It stays there for 8 years that you were 30 days late, and that affects your score. Okay, big deal. Yep.
Every year I have people ask me about these credit card consolidated debt deals, supposedly scams that are out there. People think that's a good idea to reduce their debt. But what those credit card consolidation deals often do is they tell you to stop making payments so that everything's late. And then they go in and negotiate the amounts down.
Yep.
And I tell people every year, I say, first of all, this is going to destroy your credit because you're going to have all these late payments. Whatever they get written down or off is going to destroy your credit. And then you end up paying this huge fee to the credit card consolidation company. And then what a lot of people don't realize is in January, you'll get a form from those credit cards that said, we forgave $10,000, whatever, of your debt. And that is taxable as income. Yep. One year I had a client come in, she had done all that early in the year, got, I don't know, it was like $15,000 or something of credit card debt written off. Later in the year, she inherits a bunch of money. So, and the way it was structured, she had a lot of taxable income, so she ended up paying a lot of taxes on that money that had been written off. But forgiven debt in those cases is income, and that fee you pay the credit card company to get it written down is not an expense.
I'm going to throw out a disclaimer here. Okay. This is an area of credit strategy, credit score strategy that I have personally researched, not dealt with firsthand. In my research, first of all, everything you were saying is correct. But from a logical standpoint, again, this is hard to say because I don't want to encourage anyone ever to not pay debt. But the person who already has all these accounts in a delinquent status, the damage is done. Okay? If this company comes along and renegotiates what you owe, if you pay half of what you owed, it will cause your score to tick up like this. And then that company, as you said, yes, technically on your report at that point, you don't owe that debt. But that debt, most of the time, by the time you would speak to a company like that, is already in a charge-off status anyway. Where, a lot of those types of companies, they don't even take the time to go after you. Credit cards is unsecured debt. I mean, they're not, sometimes they'll send it off to a scary collector to try to scare you out of it, But yeah, those renegotiation companies, if they're selling you on it would fix your credit, that's not accurate. That's not true. Those accounts simply become zero balance accounts that were negotiated, but they still stick there as charged off accounts for 7 years. They are not expunged from the report. They don't disappear when they're paid off or settled. So I know I've heard a lot of those companies advertising will fix your credit. That's not the case. Really, it's more of a state of mind issue. If you really want to get this debt paid off, we'll help you do it. But even then, they're negotiating the debt based on your unwillingness or incapacity to pay. Yeah, I didn't want to go into that too much, but those things are, you need to be careful with those things. I mean, they really, in the end, they mostly benefit the company that did the work for you. Because what that company does is if you have $20,000 credit card debt, they negotiate it down to 10 and then they collect a $3,000 fee. So in the end, you're just paying
You pay tax
13
on
instead of 20.
10.
Right.
Is it?
Right.
That's what I was getting at, and what, like I said, the first thing they tell you to do is make this stop paying.
Right.
So then you have this 30, 60 day, you have all this.
Yeah, and it's destroying your credit.
Right.
At that point, that is not a credit when they tell you to do that. And bankruptcy attorneys tell you the same thing. And the reason for that is that bankruptcy is kind of humorous to me as I became more familiar with credit bureaus, because a lot of people, by the time they're filing bankruptcy, these things are there and the credit is destroyed anyway. And most of them will fix themselves in a number of years unless you literally have the income to pay them and just decided I don't want to. That's almost the only point of bankruptcy. But most people get into the situation of running into severe income problems where they're not collectible anyway. You know, I had one customer ever who filed bankruptcy, and in 5 years, while the bankruptcy was still in the report, we gave them a loan. You know why? Because up to the moment of the bankruptcy, they paid every single account on time. Every single account. And it was actually my Aunt Joyce. She had medical stuff with her brain cancer. She paid so literally 5 years into her bankruptcy, you pulled up her credit report and she had a bankruptcy and all of these perfectly paid accounts and had a 740 credit score with bankruptcy. But other people who, again, they've already got to 120 days late by the time they file bankruptcy, they're done. They're done for 7 years minimum. And you'd be surprised how many walk in a month later and want to borrow money. Blows my mind. So, big comments. Some important credit details. Some small banks do not report to bureaus unless payment history is negative. Again, that is a big deal. Your mortgage payment is one of the biggest contributors to your credit score. If a small bank isn't reporting that, that's huge. I mean, if they're not reporting to the bureau, your bureau may just consist of a couple credit cards, which is you don't have the mix, you don't have, the history of account. It's just something to keep in mind. Free credit report every year. I hope everyone knows this. About 8-10 years ago at this point, you legally are allowed to obtain a credit report from each of the 3 agencies in a calendar year. A very common suggestion in monitoring your report is to do one every 3 or 4 months, just to make sure there hasn't been identity theft or anything like that. So do that. I mean, you go to annualcreditreport.com and in 5 minutes, you can pull up your TransUnion report. It's pretty neat. Okay, you can pull that up. It'll ask you your personal information, and then it will confirm. It'll ask you some cryptic piece of information from 15 years ago. So it's asked me before if I lived at my apartment in Newcastle. I mean, it'll ask you something from way back, and once it confirms that, it'll pop up. You can save it to the computer or whatever you want to do. And it comes up in a format that is very protected. All the accounts are X'd out for the most part, things like that. But every year you can get 3 credit reports from each of those. Bad credit is extremely unforgiving. As I said, up to 7 years for late payments, charge-offs, collections, foreclosures, and Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Okay? Up to 10 years for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and some tax liens can sit there forever until they're paid. And if you have a tax lien or a lien of any sort, you are never borrowing a dime from the bank. Ever. They will not do that.
The state of Indiana is notorious for, if you get to pay your tax.
Yep.
With your tax return, or the check got lost in the mail. They sometimes will send you a notice, sometimes not. But I have dealt with clients who have found out the hard way by going to a bank that the state of Indiana has a tax lien on them. And that you don't get notices or warnings. Sometimes you don't get it, especially if you move around.
A landlord that I know very well in this town ran into that one year. Got a tax lien. It was months and months of disputes. I think he had to get an attorney involved. It needed to be expunged. Again, a paid off tax lien still highly damages your score. For it to be erased is what fixes the problem. And I know he was dealing with that. And I think it came down to, the check being lost. So, and again, that's the type of thing that freaks me out with a lot of medical collections, because there's no like follow-up phone call. Hey, we're about to send you to collections. They don't do that. They send out one notice, and if you don't have it in 24 hours, you're off. I mean, it's really bad. I mean, it's ridiculous. Errors can and should be disputed. If you see something on there that is truly inaccurate, not inaccurate in your opinion, but truly inaccurate, you can file a dispute request with the bureau that it's on, and they will investigate you and can address that issue. Excessive inquiries are highly damaging. This is a big problem I have too. I really like Tom Clark, and I really like Tim Schnelly, and I like all these guys, but most of them will put on their sign, "We'll find your financing." Okay? So what they do is they have you come in and you fill out a generic, and I guess my point is the biggest culprit of this is used car dealerships. Okay? They'll have you come in and fill out a generic credit application. They do not have their own internal department. Okay? So what they will do is they will then fax that credit application to 6 different institutions. Guess what that looks like to the credit bureau? Looks like you're going from bank to bank to bank to bank to bank trying to find money. That will hurt your score. The difference between that and a new car dealership is the new car dealership has a finance department that is authorized as a lender for all the different institutions. So what they do is get a single credit application. They run the report and then send out to the banks and say, this is what I got. Okay. The difference between that and a small used car dealership is they're just sending out saying, hey, the person interested in a loan, can you run the report? So you end up getting tons of inquiries, and those inquiries is what factors into new credit, and it can affect your score. I've seen it hurt scores pretty decent for about 6 months to a year when they see those inquiries in a successive order. Around Christmas, don't apply for every store card for discounts, because inquiry. I mean, it's literally like person after person after person calling your credit bureau saying this person wants money. What does their credit score look like? And the response to that through the FICO score model is going to say this person seems in need of money. They could be a higher risk. We're going to lower their score to communicate to lenders that they might be a higher risk. I would, if you could, I would keep credit inquiries down to once a year, if that's possible. But sometimes that changes, you know. I mean, I don't mind telling you guys, I mean, the last 2 or 3 years, I have had a lot of credit inquiries, and it doesn't seem to have hurt my score. I'm not saying it will just tank your score, but I'm saying if all a person has on their credit report is a mortgage, a car loan, a credit card, a bunch of inquiries is going to play a pretty big factor. So, co-signing for loans makes you responsible. I can't even believe I have to say this. I will never forget the old dude who came into the bank, ran an application for him, flawless credit history, one auto repossession. Flawless credit history. Had like hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. Horrible credit score. What in the world is this? That's my deadbeat grandson. I'm not paying off his car.
All right, well, you're stupid. I don't know what, I'm not gonna loan you $5 because your credit score is horrible, because you have a repossessed car. You are responsible if you co-sign, unless you are as blessed as my grandmother and have phenomenal grandchildren. Don't co-sign for them on stuff. I dealt with that so much at the bank. I mean, I felt bad, but it's like, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you buy your kid a new $25,000 car at 16 for free. I mean, maybe they haven't developed a sense of responsibility, or I mean, I dealt with it all the time. I mean, I dealt with them like, what can I do now? Because they would co-sign and they're like, can I take the car legally? It's like, no, you can't take the car. You put the title in their name. It's their car. You're just financially obligated. So if he misses one loan payment, I don't know, and you set up the bill to go to the grandson. So, I mean, we ran into people all the time that the payment would get 90 days past due, the damage is done, and they're just finding out the car is being repossessed. You know, I mean, that is, if I ever co-signed for someone, I would be getting copies of the bill on a monthly basis and confirming it was paid. I would never co-sign. Yeah, but even then, you could run into legal. I mean, that moves into the scope of legalities as opposed to the financial responsibility. I mean, if you just try to take someone's car and they have a legal right to it. But at the end of the day, yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the bank doesn't care about ownership. It doesn't. I mean, that's why divorce can be such a difficult financial situation, because you have divorced spouses split accounts, but all the financial liability is still tied. And if you have one spouse that's irresponsible, they can completely destroy it. Yeah, I mean, that can happen. And that's what, I mean, it happens quite often. But, so if you co-sign, you are responsible. It shows up on your credit report as your loan that you're making payments on, and it will affect your score. Keep unused credit cards. We talked about that. Again, you'll find that in any credit conventional wisdom article you'll ever find, because those unused credit cards are increasing your aggregate and making your utilization a smaller percentage. And if you recall, that is 30% of your FICO score, is that utilization, that debt utilization. As I said, I would never, ever, ever go above 30% on utilization at any snapshot, any day of the week. Do not have more than 30% of your lines of credit used.
I did math with my mind, and of course, she learned her lessons, but one time I co-signed for my niece, but it was a small amount. But what I decided to do, and I never let her know, I made the first payment. I made a payment. So if she ever become, so she would have.
So she was a payment
15
ahead?
days.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
She never knew that until the very end, and I said, you paid it all. That was smart.
That's really good idea.
You don't owe me for this because you're responsible for paying it. That's fine. We're done. But at least I didn't have to be concerned about somebody,
for being late, just
messing my credit up. Yeah.
That's a smart idea. But and just monitoring. I mean, I would recommend anyone. I'm not saying don't co-sign for someone I love them, but if you're co-signing, I'd be doing a phone call every month to make sure it's paid. I mean, knowing that if it's not paid, 7 years of a red flag on my credit if I don't make something for it. So, this nerdwallet.com, I do not, again, new disclaimer, I know the law around getting your credit report. I don't know how it works with getting your credit score. Okay? When you pull your TransUnion credit report, it will not have your score on it. But your score sometimes is generated. Sometimes you may look at your credit card statement, they may put your score on there because they're doing specific types of inquiries at times that do not hurt your credit. It's not a request for credit, it's more of an updated information. So sometimes credit companies, I think this NerdWallet does the same thing. For instance, I pulled my credit score through them the other day. I have already pulled my 3 reports for the year. So I'm not allowed to pull those reports anymore without paying the fee, but they were able to generate my score through my TransUnion report for free. So I wanted to mention that website. I didn't do any more information than I did on annualcreditreport.com. I mean, you put in your credit report information, it asks you that cryptic question, pops up with your score, and it says specifically this score was generated through TransUnion. If you want to know your score. Just about done, guys. Benefits of good credit. You get discounts everywhere. That's one of the best benefits. On bank products, you get discounts on rates, credit cards, mortgages, cars. I don't know if you realize this, but when I was in insurance 15 years ago, they were already starting to do credit tiered pricing. Your insurance rates are based largely on your credit. That's a big impact on your premium. Utility deposits is a big deal. If for any reason you or anybody would need to call Duke Energy and say, hey, I need to turn electric on, they will run your credit a lot of times to determine how big a deposit you have to pay based on your worthiness in paying. Connersville Utilities won't do that. Ohio Valley Gas will do that as well. Cell phone deposits. Again, this more so would apply to younger people a lot of times. They may have to pay some type of deposit to start their cell phone account. I know we have to do that. I think when I was 18 or 19, something was there where they hold a deposit based on credit, based on credit history, based on an individual's willingness to pay. You know, increased borrowing limits and flexibility, better rates on rented products, such as rental cars at the airport, sometimes will be based on your credit. Long-term condos or apartments. And this may sound corny, but to me, it's an encouraging sense of responsibility. It literally is a number telling you that you've paid your bills. You know, I mean, it just, I've always been interested and motivated to have a good credit score. Just to, have that there. Not because anyone knows that, but I want to pay my bills if I'm able to do so. And this is all about paying bills. You know, I mentioned at the very beginning of this whole lesson that there was a time in me and Rachel's life where income was much less than the money going out. I have never had less than a 740 credit score. Even whenever we were going into debt, I was making sure payments were made. This is all about making payments in an appropriate amount of time. That's really what this comes down to. Tips for building or rebuilding credit. Low debt utilization. Aim for less than 30%. I found some websites that say aim for less than 10. I mean, less is good. Pay off small collections or judgments, beginning with the most recent. This again was based on my research for this particular topic. I found that interesting. It said that if you have collections spanning over the last 5 years, it really doesn't help to pay off the older ones because the damage in many ways is done. But if you pay off the newer ones, again, it may come down to a bank underwriter's desk, and the bank underwriter say, well, their score is marginal. We noticed that they've had collections in the last couple of years, but they were all paid off. That shows a willingness to pay. You know, maybe a capacity to pay. We'll go ahead and approve the loan. Okay. Never, ever, ever pay a bill beyond 30 days. Just don't do it. It's the worst thing you can possibly do. Okay. Specifically, a loan payment. Again, utilities aren't going to be a problem until they get to a collection status, which is normally 2 to 3 months. I pay a lot of utility bills. I've had times before where somehow I missed one. The next bill comes with 2 months worth of payments and a $5 fee. Okay, nothing gets reported. That stuff only gets reported if it goes into collection status. Bank loans are different. If you are over 30 days, make sure your bank payments are clear. Make sure they get done. That's another reason why ACH is so good. Have you automatically taken out of your account. You then have an electronic agreement that it will happen, and you're not subject sometimes to the issues of the U.S. Postal Service. I use online bill pay for all my stuff, and I send about 5 payments to FCN Bank every month. I have for years, and this month, none of them arrived. None of them. I think U.S. Bank takes payments to the same vendor and puts them in one envelope to save money, and post office calls that envelope. So if I would have been following up on that and checking, which I do pretty stringently, that could become a problem. Not only would you have late fees at the bank, but if those things hit 30 days, that's when the small banks communicate with their bills. Be careful with excessive inquiries. This credit rebuilding machine, I talked about that a little bit, getting a secured credit card and just using it for small payments. Or I've actually set up people before with $1,000 unsecured installment loan or prepaid installment loan. So they give me $1,000 cash. I do $1,000 installment loan, and then set up the payments to come from an account that we put the $1,000 cash in. Credit bureau doesn't know any of that. They just know there's a new installment loan being reported to them. It's being paid. That kind of stuff helps. There's ways around that sort of stuff. Yes, buy here, pay here places rip you apart on interest, but that's one of the only places you can get a loan when your credit is destroyed, and that gets reported. That loan gets reported. So I always tell you're always going to pay for everything eventually. I used to tell people that to file bankruptcy. You're going to pay for it in your insurance rates. You're going to pay for it in your rental car. You're going to pay for it one way or another, and that's the example of how. That person's going to pay 20% at Spirit Auto when they could have paid 3% in U.S. Bank because of that credit situation. Any questions? I'd encourage you to go home. If you've never pulled your credit report, go home and do it. It's just kind of neat to look through there to see. You can learn more from pulling a credit report almost than what I've said today. It'll just show you how accounts are reported, what they look like. It'll show you the history that is there. It's pretty wild sometimes to see. You see accounts that you opened 15 years ago. Annualcreditreport.com. That is. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that. There are a lot of websites like the guys with the spunky freecreditreport.com. That is a business that is providing that legal service, but they provide that and make you sign up for a month free of their credit reporting monitoring that you then start paying for a month later. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of people aren't familiar that's what they're signed up for.
Believe how hard it is to get unsigned up for that.
Annualcreditreport.com is the specific government sponsored. They don't sell you nothing. You go there, you pick your bureau, you run your report.
We spent like an hour that day searching out phone numbers, and when we finally got a hold of this lady, you could tell she didn't have very many people. Contact her and say, shut this off.
Well, a lot of times people who are concerned enough to look at their credit report are an older generation. Those people, if they actually get on there, if a grandkid helps them, it literally says something like, we need your credit card information, but we're going to give you 4 months free of our credit monitoring service. And then in tiny print, all you have to do to cancel this is give us a phone call. And if that phone call, I had customers at the bank that had paid that for years and years and years and years and never thought anything about it, never used it, nothing. So no, annualcreditreport.com, there's none of that. It is just available for your point.
That just spun off Experian. Spun off their credit reporting and
gotcha. And I know those bureaus are heavily government regulated. I don't want to say they're government agencies. I don't believe that's the case, but they are heavily regulated by.
What's interesting about TRW is that it's a huge company. They built rockets for moon launches and all kinds of stuff. They did all kinds of onboarding parts and electronics. One of the things they also did was slip their money in. And they were doing it, 30 years ago, that's all you ever heard was.
Well, like I said, I'm positive every time someone would come in and run a loan application with U.S. Bank paid a fee to pull that report. And that's sometimes why banks won't pull 3 reports. That's what stunk, is U.S. Bank would pull TransUnion. Union Savings may report to Experian. But according to TransUnion, they have no score or a bad score. And I literally at times, when I finally figured that out, there were times I called my underwriter and was like, can I submit an Experian report or can you pull it or something? No, we don't do that. It's not our policy. I'm like, that is brain dead. That was a problem with big banks, was that not the ability to actually think. But policy here says we use TransUnion. We can't actually, Or can I bring in a payment history? Can I get a report from that bank saying they paid? But it didn't matter because they can't factor that into the FICO score. The FICO score is generated, takes all the stuff from that credit report, and turns it into a score. And you can't just plug it in. It has to be there.
Like those work, they work hard at credit, right?
That the score is what every bank's going to go on. When they go-
Put it on there to get my free annual report. I got the free annual report, but I had to pay $4.99.
Well, that's what I was saying. That Nerd Wallet, you don't have to pay. If you go to Nerd Wallet,
And
It'll-
they pull all three all at once then.
no, I think what it did is it pulls the TransUnion report and plugs it into the FICO score model and generates your FICO score. So it should give you a good idea. If you ever got a bank to pull all three reports and generate a FICO score, normally they're going to be within 20 points of each other. I mean, you shouldn't have a drastic difference unless the case like I'm mentioning, where you have a small bank not reporting something as important as a mortgage for 20 years, you know. But no, if you went to that website, I didn't have to pay anything. I mean, it didn't know credit card information. I didn't even try to trick you into signing up or anything. I put in the same information that I do at annualcreditreport.com, and it popped up my score. And then it tries to say, hey, we'd love you to sign up for all this stuff, but you don't have to as a preliminary thing to get your score. So, but it's just nerdwallet.com. You scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I think it says get your credit score, and you can have it in 5 minutes. Or less than that. Credit is one of those things, again, guys, all of this is practical stuff that I really believe we as spiritual people need to do. We all deal with this stuff all the time. Yes, we're not going to a dozen Bible verses as we look at this stuff, but this communicates to the world what kind of people we are, you know, and I think we just need to be familiar with it. This is a lot of the stuff. We may be dealing with people that aren't dealing with drug addictions and alcoholism, but they're dealing with this junk. I mean, they're dealing with these problems and these hard times and these unknowns. I mean, I dealt with it at the bank all the time. People in their 50s and 60s that were just drugged down by credit card issues and debt and problems. I mean, it was just a pain, constant pain. And it's so unforgiving. You know, I mean, you have to deal with it for decades. So, I mean, I think we have a working knowledge of it. Again, I hope it's something positive or a tool we can have on that. So. I don't know what I'm doing next. I'm done with this module. I think, because we're still in debt, I think I want to move on to debt strategy, just raw strategy around actually utilizing it, reducing it, you know, things like that. And then debt will be over and we'll move on to some other stuff. So. All right. I will close out in a word of prayer, and then we'll be dismissed this afternoon. Let's pray. Dear God, Heavenly Lord, I thank you again for the opportunity to reason together. Thank you for this beautiful day, Lord, and just the many blessings you've given. I pray that these things, while maybe not plainly spiritual, I pray that they might be spiritual things, spiritual knowledge that we can use to assist others, that we can use to be good stewards of the grace that you have given us in our lives. Lord, I just pray that we can take everything we've gained today through fellowship in your word and preaching of your word. And Lord, I just pray that we can take that into this new week and be effective lights for you. I ask things in Jesus' name. I hope other people took food.
They did a lot of this.
Okay.
And then I figured
I figured everybody would be able to get something.
see, I have always.
You should go to sleep in the car.
If you do it that way, well, I just found research for this because I was always afraid too. I'm like, well, I know usually I can get that. But no, if you get your soul, that should not be.
Just in case they get.
Yeah, right on top.
Mine is
Right on top.
So,
You make a
I mean, I don't need it, but I do.
Yeah.
Check it out.
And it should make you scroll over the bottom.
Oh, you guys, you fine. What do you two think you're doing? Desiree and Isabel.
Get on there for some countries that you don't.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere without us. And we aren't ready yet.
This is the.
Okay,
See, like, you scroll,
Okay, scroll over
and
there.
like I said.
Well, Rush, you're gonna have to teach your granddaughters.
And
You wanna play Bible trivia? You're gonna teach your granddaughters who wrote the book of David and Isaiah. Neither one of them can get it.
Look up Daisy.
Yeah, that was it. I looked at it. I'm like, really? She's like, David. I'm like, really? That's your favorite book? Yeah. Okay, where's the book, David?
I know they didn't ask for it.
It was great.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was that expression when you just pull it, like they thought they were right. They're so excited they're right. You're like, nope. They're
Because
like,
that's a
oh.
very, very lot of.
Yeah, they do get low starts emailing you somehow.
I need to do that with Rural King, because Rural King
Well,
is sending me promotions and my Gmail.
Never do any good. And sure enough, I focused on
Because I don't look at that ad and it just comes up to my Gmail. All these little promotions that I don't need. I knew it was available.
Everybody get food.
I got plenty of food right now.
Yeah, we had New Year's Eve at our house and we fixed ribs, mashed
Oh, yeah, that was your
potatoes,